This is Ascension Island. Located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, some 1,000 miles from Africa and 1,400 miles from South America, this tiny green dot could hold the key to our future survival on this planet, and even into worlds beyond our own. Ascension rose above the waves only 1 million years ago as the result of an underground volcano erupting, and it may have still been erupting as recently as the 16th century. Owned by the United Kingdom, officially, nobody's from here, but though the island is an infant in geological terms, it already has a storied history. It's been used as a stopping point for sailors, a place of study for astronomers, a key strategic asset by the military, and even as a tracking station by NASA. But the most interesting thing about this island is that what was once no more than the barren tip of an undersea volcano is now a tropical paradise teeming with life. And what's more astonishing, it's only taken 150 years to get here. When you think about terraforming a landscape, there's a good chance you're thinking about humans colonizing Mars. But the first scientific experiment in terraforming actually took place right here, on this seemingly insignificant rock, and it all started in the 19th century. Ascension Island has an area of approximately 34 square miles. A volcanic peak poking out beyond the surface of the Atlantic Ocean, for most of its life the island was nothing more than a wasteland of lava flows and cinder cones. That is, until humans came along. Ascension was first discovered by the Portuguese navigator João de Nova in 1501, and was initially named Conception Island. But it was rediscovered 2 years later by Alphonse d'Albuquerque, who by chance made land on Ascension Day, and the island's new name would be the one that stuck. But being dry and barren, the island was of little use to the burgeoning Portuguese Empire, and so went unclaimed by the Crown. However, the island was often used as a stop-off point by sailors heading to the New World, so much so that the Portuguese introduced goats and later other animals to the island as a source of meat for future mariners. But the introduction of herbivorous mammals only made what was an already sparse landscape even more desolate. Ascension remained uninhabited until 1815, when Napoleon was exiled to the island of St. Helena, some 700 miles to the southeast. In a bid to discourage the French from mounting a rescue mission, the British sent a small naval garrison to the closest bit of land, Ascension, and claimed it in the name of King George III. The Royal Navy designated the island as a stone frigate, and it was named HMS Ascension. The island continued to be used as a base by the British military, and in 1836 was visited by Charles Darwin on return to England from the Galapagos Islands following his 5-year voyage on the Beagle. Darwin described the island as a naked hideousness, with an arid, treeless landscape and nothing growing at all near the coast. He noted that there was sparse vegetation inland that supported about 600 sheep, many goats, a few cows and horses. It was a harsh environment, and what little rainfall there was evaporated away almost as quickly as it fell from the sky. He agreed with the saying used by the people of St. Helena: "We know we live on a rock, but the poor people at Ascension live on a cinder." In 1843, Joseph Hooker visited the island for the first time. He was a botanist, explorer, and the son of the director of the Royal Botanical Gardens, Kew. But rather than seeing an inhospitable rock, Hooker saw Ascension as a blank canvas that had the potential to become a vibrant ecosystem of his own making. 4 years later, and with encouragement from Darwin, Hooker gave the Royal Navy 4 suggestions on how they could transform Ascension to become more habitable. The first suggestion was to plant trees around the island's highest point, Green Mountain. Hooker considered this to be of the first importance, as thereby the fall of rain would be directly increased. Secondly, he suggested encouraging the formation of deeper soils and preventing soil erosion by planting more vegetation on the steeper slopes. Thirdly, he suggested planting drought-adapted trees and shrubs in the more promising areas of the lower valleys to create pasture for livestock. And finally, once rainfall had been increased, he wanted to introduce suitable crops into gardens on Green Mountain to provide a food source for the military. There was little fresh water on the island, but the fog on the mountains could be captured by trees to trap moisture in the air and bring it to the ground as droplets, providing fresh water source for the island. The soil was mostly made up of volcanic clinker and was of poor quality, but the roots of trees would help to break it down, improving the soil for agriculture in the future. These measures, Hooker thought, would allow the island to transform from a hostile wasteland into a beautiful tropical paradise. So, starting in 1850 and continuing for many years thereafter, ships arrived on the island with an assortment of plants from botanical gardens around the world. Records show early naval ships carrying seeds and seedlings from botanical gardens in Europe, Africa, and South America. A wide range of species that had never evolved together were brought in, with the only common thread between them being Hooker's assessment that they would do well in Ascension's tropical island climate. The sides of Green Mountain were flanked with a large stand of tall Norfolk pine trees, which could be used as replacement masts for ships. Rows of eucalyptus and banana trees were dotted around, and at the peak of the mountain, a lush crown of bamboo. The hope was that the new foliage would trap moisture from the warm southeasterly winds that swept continuously over the island, letting it drip down to ground level and assuring a fresh water supply for the troops. By 1868, orchards of oranges, lemons, custard apples, and lychees were planted. Tens of thousands of trees and shrubs were imported, resulting in the development of enough good soil to grow crops. As a result, sparrows, chaffinches, linnets, and several coastal African birds arrived on the island. Then something rather strange happened. Ascension's climate changed. Where previously rainwater had fled to the sea, the new forest held onto it in soil and vegetation. By the 1880s, Hooker's mist-catching trees had formed a small pond at the mountain's summit, the island's first body of fresh water. Evaporation from leaves created a humid microclimate that cooled the land, bringing yet more rain and allowing low-level clouds to blanket the fledgling ecosystem. This was the birth of the first man-made cloud forest, and Hooker's plan was seemingly a success. But not everything flourished. The orange trees withered, and many of Hooker's botanical plantings waned. Only the fittest non-native plant species survived. The remaining mashup of flora from around the globe went largely untended for most of the 20th century, but the forest slowly expanded year by year. Grasses, shrubs, and thorny mesquite plants thrived at the relatively dry base of the mountain. At elevations between 330 and 600 meters, increasing moisture made it possible for prickly pear and acacia to survive, and in the misty zone above 600 meters, bananas, juniper, ginger, fig, raspberry, and many other plants and trees flourished. According to traditional ecological principles, this hodgepodge of endemic grasses and ferns, combined with more than 300 non-native species, should never have evolved into a thriving ecosystem. Complex forests are thought to take millions of years of careful self-selection to develop, but the man-made ecosystem on Green Mountain, where introduced species and native plants now fit together as though they co-evolved, took only a century. The important ecological question then is, how do complex ecosystems develop? Classical ecological theory says that organisms evolve together over time to fill in various niches in the system, and that these niches dictate the maximum number of species that can coexist in a single community. The idea is that co-evolution between species is a necessary condition for reaching a diverse and balanced ecosystem. But an alternative view is a process known as ecological fitting, where the emphasis is not on co-evolution but on chance accidents of history and the random dispersal of species. Take for example an insect arriving in a new habitat. It will be able to survive if there's enough food for it, even if there's no history of co-evolution between itself and the local plants. By chance, it fits into the local ecology. Ascension Island's ecosystem is a spectacular example of ecological fitting. It shows that co-evolution is not necessary for the development of complex ecosystems. On Green Mountain, where humans have taken on the role of nature's plant dispersers, the ecosystem has gone from species-poor fern-dominated hillsides to a species-rich cloud forest in just 150 years. Ascension Island shows that man-made ecosystems like Green Mountain can play a critical role in our future on this planet, and even beyond. Until recently, the whole point of conservation was to undo the damage done by humans, getting rid of invasive species and allowing a landscape to return to the way it was before humans got involved. But more recently, with examples such as Ascension, the idea of using human intervention to create novel ecosystems has gained traction. With a novel ecosystem approach, conservationists have the freedom to rebuild a now-dry floodplain with drought-resistant species, to replant a fire-ravaged landscape with plants that thrive in hotter regions, or even to create brand new ecosystems from nothing more than a volcanic outcrop in the middle of the ocean. One of the most pressing concerns of our time is human-induced climate change. In this context, the effects of terraforming somewhere like Green Mountain as a way to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere are of special interest. The man-made change in Ascension's ecosystem has greatly increased the amount of carbon stored in the vegetation there. Not only that, but as Hooker himself predicted, Ascension now has much deeper soils, which leads to even greater subsurface carbon capture. The rapid construction and development of systems like Green Mountain in other areas that are devoid of forest could help mitigate the effects of global warming. But it's not just our own planet where these ideas will be of use. As humans get closer to one day settling Mars, the ideas that were first cultivated on Ascension could prove pivotal in turning the Red Planet into a place where humans can live. The terraforming of Ascension Island shows us that nature's snail-speed co-evolution is not always necessary for complex ecosystems to develop. Sometimes things can happen quickly and chaotically by just fitting together. Terraforming Mars may require evolutionary insights like this about random species assembling, competing, and cooperating in strange new places. Volcanic islands usually develop ecosystems over millions of years, from the plant seeds that drift there or are deposited by migrating birds. In Ascension's case, as a younger volcanic island, that process had barely even begun to take place. Humans kick-started it with the mass introduction of plant species from around the world that showed promise of succeeding in such an environment. Many species didn't survive, but those that did now thrive. In effect, what Darwin, Hooker, and the Royal Navy achieved was the world's first experiment in terraforming. And what they proved is that humans can transform hell into paradise.